We'd seen storms roll in. We'd seen black clouds, but we'd never seen nothing like this. As we looked towards the north and the west, there was a roll of dirt that just rolled far up into the heavens, farther than you could see. And it was a blackened dirt that fell upon us like a ghost, and it stayed longer than we ever wanted it, the Dust Bowl. Today we're celebrating a recipe that got us through the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, fried cornmeal mush. So you might be asking yourself, what is cornmeal mush? Well, really all it is cornmeal and water, and then it's boiled, and then it's chilled, and then it's fried. But when we talk about mush, it really translates from back in the Northeast and even over in England as porridge. The Mesoamericans, many thousands of years ago, the indigenous people that were here, they grew what they called maize, which really translates into corn. Corn was brought about really as a food source, not only just for livestock, but mostly for people. Now sure, it was grown and it was dried, and then it was usually ground with a rock surface to make a meal. Now when you're making cornmeal mush, the finer the grind, the better it is for making mush. In the 16th century, and everybody started growing corn, and then they got to figuring that we can dry this stuff. There's so many things that we can use it for. Not only just to make this, but cornbread. Corn is very essential to those people back then, but it was also very essential to the people going through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. In 1929, the stock market crashed. But to come along with that, there was a drought that had already started in the plain. And by the time 1930 got here, due to over-farming, drought, and an undying wind that blowed day after day after day, we had the Dust Bowl. I mean, black clouds just rolling in from everywhere. The epicenter of that was Dalhart, Texas. But my dad told me stories that when they went through the Dust Bowl, it would get so dark that chickens would go to roast right after noon. That they would be up in the attics, the old men, the next day trying to scoop the sand out of the attic to keep the ceiling boards from caving in. And during this time, there were 400,000 people that left the plains due to the Dust Bowl and the Depression and went west to California. These people become migrant workers. These people become anything that they could be just to survive. But this was still on their table. This was still on their plate. To start this recipe, we got 4 cups of cornmeal. Now when you go and buy cornmeal, don't buy the stuff that says cornmeal mix. Buy yellow cornmeal. And to that, we're going to add a little salt. I'd say about that much. Give it a little stir, and then we're going to add some water. Now you've seen me, we have already put 4 cups of water in a stock pot over there, and it needs to come to a boil. Now, we're going to err on the side of like I do when I make bread. Calls for about 2 cups, but we're going to start with 1 3/4 cups.
And that's cold water?
That is cold water, not hot water. But you want to get this to where that cornmeal is going to soak up all that water, and it's going to make nearly like a batter. But just keep stirring it. As this sets, this is going to congeal, and that cornmeal is going to soak up even more water. But we're going to meet you over there. We're going to put it in that boiling water, and we're going to make us some mush. Well, we got our water. It has come to a boil. It has. This is ready. So when you reach that boiling point of that water and you got your cornmeal ready to go, let's just dump her in there. Now we're going to cook this, stirring constantly until it thickens. Now my mother used to tell me about an old recipe, and she had a cornmeal mush recipe, and she'd clipped it off an old flour sack many years ago for cornmeal mush. I wished I knew what happened to it, but every research I was doing, they was all about the same. Water and cornmeal. So when you pour that cold water in there, that boil's going to quit. So we're going to bring it back to a boil until it thickens. Probably going to take 3 to 4 minutes. Then we're going to put it in a greased loaf pan. Making this, I remember some of the stories that my dad told me. But my dad said we went through that Dust Bowl. We survived it. It gave us true grit. We had it in our ears. We had it in our teeth. We even had it in our plate. Determination, pride, and just a struggle constantly every day to fight the wind and the weather. But I'm going to tell you this right now. Y'all need to come in here close, because our porridge or mush is about to the thickness we need it. And you can see how thick that has got. Probably been on about 2 minutes. So Whatever we face as a nation today, whatever's going on, we got to know that we need this grit and this determination that was brought about from the toughest generation of people that ever lived, and they're passing it on to us, and me and Shan are sharing it with y'all in some cornmeal fried mush. Well, got her in there, smooth it out like troweling concrete you do. We're gonna let this cool to room temperature, then we're gonna cover it with some plastic wrap, stick it in the ice box and let it chill for at least 4 hours, and then it is ready to fry up. See how nice that dumped out of there? Make sure you grease that loaf pan or this ain't gonna happen. But hey, you know, this is cornmeal mush and we're gonna fry it. But also we did in our cookbook a fried cream of wheat. That's really the same. Shan said her dad and them used to fix it a long, long time ago. But get you a sharp knife, and then we're just gonna slice right down through here, and then just let it lay over. There you go, that's number one. You can get them as thick or as thin as you want them. Now, if y'all are interested too, be sure and stick around to the end of this. I'm gonna share a story with y'all that my dad told me about the Dust Bowl. And it's in our cookbook, and I'd love to read it to you. It's called Dust of Our Fathers. But I'm gonna meet y'all over here at the fire. We need to get a cast iron skillet hot, and we need to fry up this mush. Cast iron skillet, 2 tablespoons of butter. We're about medium, maybe just a little over that. And we're gonna cook these till they're golden brown. You gotta be careful too when you're doing this. Get your spatula under there, and then, oh, did you hear that sound? You can see how fast that butter sort of soaked that up. You might want to turn your heat down just a tad. We want these to be golden brown and set up on both sides, but you can always tell you got enough in there if they'll slide all over the skillet. You know, nothing is sticking that way. How long we gonna cook them? Beats me, people. We're gonna cook them till they're just right, because you want to make sure that that side is really cooked well before we turn that over so we don't break nothing. So I don't know who was the first one in the boat, but I think it was this fella. We'll just take a look. He soaked up some of that butter, so he's gonna have to brown some more. You know, when you're cooking this, my dad said they had it this way many times. But if they ever thought that it was really rich, his mother would sprinkle a little sugar on there. Then they would put molasses or maple syrup on there. Whew. It was fine dining back in the day. There it is, fried cornmeal mush. Now I'll give you a little tip too. Be sure when you're watching them, when you're frying them, that you see them bottom edges go to crisping up really well before you turn them, because them things are accident prone to try to fall apart if you ain't paying attention. But a good chill in the ice box for 4 hours, bring them out there, and then let's get to frying them in that butter. Also another tip, spray that spatula really well with some of that good cooking oil spray. That way you can slip under there and gently turn them things over. Now, well, last time I had one of these, it was made out of cream of wheat. It was not made out of cornbread. So sort of cuts like a pancake, it does. Got a little of that syrup on it. It's surprising. Yes, Lulu, it is pretty good. Really, when you get in there to it, if you don't even think about it, you just think you're eating a pancake. Hear that little crunch it's got? You know, thank God for those people that went through tough times, that had just simple pleasures in life. They always told me that tough times bring about tough people, and they do for all of that generation. And hey, easy to make they are. We hope y'all enjoyed a little part of history as going back. Don't forget what all them people's struggles were. Apply them to yourself today. You'll be sure and make it. But fix this recipe and be sure and stick around for the story there at the end. And don't forget also, we made this too with cream of wheat with a caramel pecan syrup in our cookbook here, so be sure and check that out as well. But it is with pride, honor, and privilege that I tip my hat to all the servicemen and women and all the veterans who have kept that old flag a-flying over camp, no matter where they be. Rest of you, get on up in here close. I'll dust the dust bowl off of me, We'll give you a hug. God bless you each and every one, and I'll see you down the fried cornmeal mush trail. The greatest generation of people that ever lived to me was the people that went through the Dust Bowl, and they were tough. Let's talk about true grit. They had it. But the same thing still applies to us today, and if you'll listen to this story and bear with me, hey, I think we'll all get a little meaning out of it. And it's just called this, the dust of our fathers. I was raised and still live in the very southwest corner of Oklahoma, and if you throw a rock to the west, it'll land in Texas. Our community of Hollis is nestled in a flat, grassy prairie of the Great Plains. Wheat and cotton fields dot the landscape, as well as cattle ranches, many of which have been in operation for generations. It's harsh country. The wind blows and the dust rolls here. Some calves are born and they won't feel a raindrop on their back for months. Folks just don't have grit in their teeth, but it's in their hearts too. It's not for the weak, and most of the folks who call this their home are descendants of Dust Bowl survivors. Historians claim that the Oklahoma Panhandle was the epicenter of the Dust Bowl, and as the crow flies, Hollis is about 140 miles southeast of the Panhandle. There were reports of dirt traveling as far as New York City from the great dust storms in the 1930s. So really, our little town wasn't a far commute for the chaos to come knocking at folks' doors. My father, he lived through this Dust Bowl in Hollis, along with parents and 4 siblings. When I was growing up, he'd tell us kids stories about the great darkness that swept over his home and as far as the eye could see when he was a little boy. Remembering his tales now, I realized that he was not only a part of the greatest generation, but the toughest one as well. I can still hear his words today. I remember the wind blowing pretty hard that first morning, which was the beginning of the dirty 30s. The sun disappeared like a storm was rolling in, but the clouds had a strange color to them. I asked Mama if it was a tornado. She seemed panicked as she called for us to come inside. The murky clouds kept building and tumbling over and over, and I remember when the black wall finally hit, it was like a dark shadow that laid over our house. Its evil breath, full of dirt, blew heavy against our door. Mama lit a coal oil lantern in the kitchen, and even though it was clearly afternoon, when the sun should have still been shining, the wind beat on the house with an eerie howl, rattling the window panes so hard that I thought they would shatter. Small particles of earth crept into every crack of the house. Mama quickly hung quilts over the windows and doors trying to keep the dust out. The wind went on for hours, and the coal oil lanterns grew dim from all the dust floating around us. What we thought was just a bad storm that would last a few hours didn't leave. It stayed for 6 more years. At night, Mama would put me and my twin sister to bed. She'd wrap our faces with a wet towel to keep us from breathing the dust while we slept. I'd think, I can't go to sleep, because I might not ever get up. In the mornings, the wind would usually be calm, but it had left its calling card. Across our white bed sheets were long, thin lines of dirt, 8 inches apart, that had blown through the cracks in the walls. Every few days, Pa and my older brothers would get up in the attic with a shovel to remove all the dirt from the ceiling to keep it from caving in. Chickens would roost in the middle of the day because of the darkness. Mailboxes were covered by sand drifts. We called it the devil's breath. There was no escaping it. Everyone was affected. The rich, the poor, the livestock. We'd go over to the neighbors and help them remove some of their cows that have died from suffocation. Later, even more perished from starvation. Even though that dark era is decades behind us, its presence still lingers in the areas where the heavy dirt settled throughout America's heartland. It's bred into its people. There's an undying faith that tomorrow will be better. There ain't no giving up, and always look for the good. The glass is half full, so let's keep pouring. Faith, family, and courage got those folks through the toughest of times. Like a sandblaster, the Dust Bowl removed a lot of things from this old country and her people, but it didn't get their will to survive. With a gritty force, it carved out a tougher, more determined bunch of folks. I'm glad I didn't have to go through it, but I am so proud and indebted to those who did. I hope to continue their legacy. So when it hasn't rained in months and the wind kicks up the dust without ceasing, I remember how it must have been for my father and all the fathers who endured the hard times of the 30s. And I'll be thankful for a little bit of grit in my teeth and hope in my heart. I was just admiring our baby. Hey, so damn cute. Ought to be getting along.